Hello and welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies. My name is Sarah and I'm very excited today to talk all about Outschool classes. Now, my previous video did provide an overview of what Outschool is, as well as my teaching there so far. It's been a great online summer job for me and a great way to earn extra money as a teacher, up to $100 an hour in my own case, or $105 technically. And in today's video, I will be actually creating a class so you can see what the process looks like, at least what my process looks like. I'll also be talking about how I manage the sections, which is where I'm applying one of those lessons learned that I talked about in my last video, which again, I'll link down below and up in the cards. And then also during class, what I do. Since that was something I was probably most nervous about before I actually started, what do I do during class? Since this is my first time on the platform, but many of my students had already taken other Outschool classes. So I will go through those three things. Of course, there are probably different opinions on some of this stuff, but I just want to show you what this Outschool sample class kind of looks like. I'll also be showing my screen throughout the process. And at any point, if you haven't yet signed up for Outschool and you think this sounds interesting, I have a link for you in the description field so you can get signed up as well. All right, so to begin the screen recording portion, I am currently just in my dashboard. I went up to Teach up here once I was logged in, and I've got my classes here. Now, yesterday I added 2 new classes, but I am going to be adding another cooking class right now. So I'm going to click Add Class, and the name of this class, I already kind of planned it out here. This is another cooking class, and it is a multi-day cooking class just because I found that my cooking class that was multiple days, Eat the Rainbow, has been very successful so far. Now, one key thing when we're trying to choose what sort of class we teach, I think it's important to see what's already available and make sure you're not copying something exactly. I would just go to Find Classes, and if there is something you're interested in, make sure that no one's offering the exact same thing, or that at least you have a different way of going about it. Unfortunately, the platform has caught some teachers just trying to copy and paste someone else's listing. Obviously, don't do that. So I just typed in kind of what I was interested in here for dinner. I said family-friendly dinner. There is an ongoing dinner cooking club here that I see, and taking a look at it, I can see here that this is different than I'm offering. Mine also would be cooking dinner, but this one is more meat focused, which I would not be doing, as well as the menus are completely different. So because of that, I think it's fine. I don't have to worry about it, and there weren't other things that came up. So just make sure you're not copying anything exactly. People will obviously have different approaches. I know when I listed my monthly budget class, there were a few other people also offering monthly budget classes, but I looked carefully at their listings and I saw that they were taking different directions or using different tools, and I was using my TPT resource that I created that's really one of our best resources ever, that's very specific and organized and accounts for so many things, so I knew it was okay to use. So I have my listing here. I've got my title, and then you want to provide a 1-sentence summary about what your course is about. So in this case, I just said, cook these delicious and easy to make dinners for your family. I can always go back and change this, but for now that's fine. For subject, since I'm doing a cooking class, this would be in the life skills category. And there are a couple different types you can set up. This is going to be a multi-day course because it will be offered multiple times. So far, I have just gone between one time and multi-day. I will see in the future if I go into the other two, but for now, those have been helpful for me. So I selected multi-day. Then image and video. Now, I do not use the video. I just use the image, at least at this point, and I haven't had any problems. And you want to make sure you're using either your own photograph or copyright-free photos for the image. I'm going to go to Canva here, and I find it's about YouTube thumbnail sized. So pulling up Canva, and I will be using one of these grid templates just because I'm showing multiple recipes that I'm making, just to give people a taste of what they can expect there. And then this particular cooking class has a few different food items, so I'm going to go through right now and select those. I just finished making my image on Canva, and it just gives a little bit of a highlight about what can be made during that class. And I'm uploading that image now for the course platform. And then I will select the ages as well as the class size. And then this class is 4 times per week. All right, then we get into the course description portion. And here there are a few key details you're going to include. I think they do a nice job being specific about the types of things that you would want to include, such as what will be taught, what topics will you cover, how will your class be structured, how will you teach, your teaching style, what kinds of interaction will there be, any required knowledge or experience. So I'm going to be filling that out. They also have additional spots here such as learning goals, homework, assessment. I personally leave those blank. They are optional, and I find, at least with a cooking class, they're not necessarily super important. There's also spots for materials, and so in this case I would include a supply list related to those different dishes. And there's also spots where you can add in if there's any parental guidance or any teacher expertise. A lot of this is optional. I suppose that if you are getting started and maybe are doing classes that are a bit more competitive, it could be helpful to have that extra information. I have not seen it affect me negatively so far. There's also the spot here for a welcome post, which I will be adjusting. And also for pricing, you can change that. So I know for me with this class, since it's a 4-day class and we're making a bunch of recipes, I'm going to be charging $60 per student. And I just keep whatever they use as the default refund policy, I just keep that there. And then after you have filled in these different pieces, you can click Request Listing. Now it does take me a little bit of time to put these together, but I will show you an example of one that I've already done so you can see what I did. Back to that class list I showed you earlier. Let's go to Make Ahead Breakfasts. I listed that one last night. So I just went to the class and then I clicked Edit. So you can see my title here. I say in this one-time class, students will prepare healthy make-ahead breakfasts that they can enjoy throughout the week. Plugged in details about it. And so in terms of description, I talked about how it's a one-time class. I talked about the 3 different recipes that they're going to be making. I talked a little bit about how each recipe can be customized to different favorite foods, what you have on hand, allergy preferences. I talk about it's a hands-on class since I make the food while the class is going on and while the students are making their food. I also have a focus on nutrition, so I do specifically make healthy recipes, and I talk through some of the benefits of each recipe as we go, as well as giving general cooking tips as we go. And then I talk about if the class requires any past cooking experience or parental guidance. In this particular class, parental supervision is not required because we're not using the stove or the oven or anything like that. In the parental guidance sections, I just reiterated that parental supervision was not required. And then I did use a supply list here. And when people actually register for the class, they'll get access to a more detailed PDF, which I put together just like I would a TPT product, just a nice organized PDF. Here is the PDF. I just put together the ingredient list, and then I have the recipes. That part is definitely the most time consuming, but I like being able to have it attached so it's ready to go for the students. But there are some where I have actually listed the class before I had the ingredients there or had the specifics there, and that's also been fine. So just decide what works for you. And then I have the message that is waiting for them on essentially the Outschool version of Google Classroom when students enroll in the class. I've got pricing here. This is just a one-time class that's 70 minutes. And if I made any changes, I would click Save, but that's kind of how a class is created. Now, when it comes to managing the sections, if I go back here to Summary, again, this is a new class, but if I wanted to create a section, I would just click Add a Section. And when I do, it's going to give me some options. I'm actually going to add a different class right now. I just had another, from yesterday, I had another Eat the Rainbow class sell out. So I only have one available section. So I'm going to add an additional section. So for this, I'm going to click on Add Meeting Time. So I'm going to plug in, make sure you've got the correct AM or PM setting. So I'm going to have this cooking camp start at 4:30 and go until essentially 5:30 Central Time. All right, so I just went through and I added the 4 times because this class does meet 4 times. And with doing that, then it automatically defaults to private, so you can still make changes on it before you actually publish it. I can check the other information, make sure I'm happy with the number of spaces, the pricing, all of that. And then I usually don't fill out a makeup time, and I'm going to shift it to public. And now, when I go back to the listing, I can see here that my new section is added, and then there's the section the same day that already has 4 learners enrolled. Since I've had so many classes sell out of that, definitely want to keep adding more. So that's how I manage my sections. And then what's cool is, let me actually choose a section of something that doesn't have students yet so I can show you inside it. Here's a section, it's got no students in it, but you've got learners, classroom, recordings, and edit. So when students enroll, I will see their names pop up here. If I click on the student, there will be a sidebar here that allows me to contact their parents or to change their enrollment if they wanted to be transferred to another section, or if I only had 1 kid or 2 kids enrolled in one group, but I could put them in another section so they were with other students. Classroom, it's so simple. Whenever it's time to start, you make sure you're logged out of your own personal Zoom account if you've got one, and you click Start Live Meeting, and then it runs just like a normal Zoom call. And then you can also add messages or posts just like a Google Classroom kind of a thing. And I did find out you can schedule them in advance. So there was a class where I finished the guide kind of late in the evening, and I wanted the students to have access to it the next day. I was excited to learn that I could schedule it, so it didn't show up that I was finishing it at 1 in the morning. I was able to have it set up for first thing the next day, like at 8 or 9 a.m. After your class happens, recordings will show up here, and that's predominantly for the students to watch them again. And if I wanted to edit the section, I could go there and make changes to it. So if I wanted to change the number of students in the class or anything like that, I could do that there. All right, now that we have stepped away from the screen recording, what does an actual class look like? To begin, I try to get onto the class 1 to 2 minutes before the class time begins. I first logged on 5 minutes before class began the first time just because I was a little extra nervous, which was, I think, helpful for me to acclimate myself to the materials. But you do get recorded from the moment you join, and so there were 5 minutes of me in the class recording, kind of putzing around and basically just being nervous and like prepping things. So ideally, I didn't want to do that again. So the 1 or 2 minutes before is plenty of time to get on make sure everything's all squared away and ready to go. And then once kids start arriving, you will have to admit them to your class. There's basically a doorbell sound that happens, and you click admit when your students join the class. With that in mind, as the students are joining, I'm kind of saying hello and welcoming them. And if it is their first time using Zoom, it also can be helpful to give an overview of what the different features are. And I find that most of the kids, at least that I've taught so far, have already taken some classes on Outschool, and so they were able to mute themselves pretty easily, and they kind of knew their way around the platform. But you could definitely go over those if they weren't as comfortable with it. In addition to that, I would also recommend having some sort of community building activity. So in my case, I do a question of the day, which is a chance for me to interact with each student and for us to build some community, even though, we're all in separate places. And since we had a multiple day class, at least for my cooking class, it definitely did help to build those relationships and help people feel more comfortable and feel like they're a meaningful part of the class, which they are. The questions were simple, things like, what's your favorite animal? If you could travel anywhere, where would you go? Basic questions like that. And I always start first just to give an example and to also give students extra time to think about their answer. And I just kind of go around and check in with all of them. After we do the introductions and how to use Zoom and anything like that, that's about the first 5 minutes or so of class, at least when I have had larger groups. After that point, then we go over any expectations or an overview of what we're going to do for the day. I provide a few safety reminders, especially in regards to cooking, and then we proceed into the lesson. And with that, pacing can be a little bit tricky just because it is different than teaching in the classroom, and maybe the subject or content you're teaching is also different, but I try to make sure that I am staying on a healthy pace. I did so far in my first 7 class sessions that I've taught, I did go over in 2 of them. Now, mostly kids were fine with it because I don't think they had anything scheduled immediately after, and that is an option. Obviously, that's not the goal. If they say the class is only going for this amount of time, ideally that's how it's set up, but I try to make sure I fit those timelines. Throughout the class, I'm making sure to answer questions. I have had some slides prepared that I use, but then there's also discussion and hands-on things showing my screen and that sort of thing. You can decide if you want your students to more so use the chat feature or if you want them to actually speak. Now, I know there is a raise hand button in Zoom. I have found, especially when cooking, that I'm not necessarily looking that closely at the section where someone's hand might be raised, but I just have my kids either just turn their mic on automatically to ask a question or just hold their hand up in their screen as if they have a question there. That's been easier for me. Then I call on the students. So those are kind of methods. If it is a smaller class, students don't really have to raise their hands as much because there's not as many people trying to compete to share their ideas, and I still do prompt that. I might say, okay, let's share what we got for this portion. So that's kind of a rundown of my classes. In the last minute or so, I thank them for being there and tell them to have a great day. Sort of the same kind of stuff or the same ways you would end just a regular class you were teaching. And if it is my last class with a particular group, I also just thank them for, a great class experience. I don't try to promote my other classes at the end. I just kind of leave it at that. I figure if a student had a great experience and they want to take more classes with you, then they'll look and see what else is offered. But it has been a format that's worked for me so far, and I plan to continue doing that. As a little bonus section, I went and got a printable here to show and illustrate this next point. I think that Outschool has immense potential in the sense that if you have something that works for you and after testing things out, figuring out what your role might be on the site and what types of classes you want to offer, it becomes really exciting trying to put a schedule together for yourself. In my last video, I did talk about how I was just sporadically adding sections at first and realized that I needed to have a clear plan. And I also originally thought that I was going to be batching, I'm going to teach on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but not at all on the other days. I actually ended up doing more reflection, and for me, I really saw that cooking class take off. So I am figuring out, number one, how can I teach that section more? And how I've decided to do it is to offer it twice per day, and then I offer it every other week, so there's a break in between. And then that class I was showing you early on that I'm setting up about family-friendly dinners, I'm going to be teaching that in the opposite weeks. So essentially, I'm basically cooking my dinner every night through these classes is kind of the premise. And I actually set up a little schedule for myself. I don't think this will be coming across in the screen here on the camera. This is just an August plan. And the way I have it set up here, between 3 different classes, I would essentially have dinner covered Monday through Friday throughout the month of August. And with that in mind, I would just be teaching that 1 hour per day for the most part. In some cases, I'd be teaching 2 hours per day just from these cooking classes alone. In addition to my smoothie bowl class, my make-ahead breakfast class, if I offer each of those 4 times per month. The wild thing about that is if I hit capacity, just with what I described, teaching 1 or 2 hours on weekdays throughout the month, I'll actually generate over $4,000 in a month. Now that is before taxes and those kind of things, but I just think it's a testament to how incredible this platform is. I tested things out. I loved the cooking classes last week that I was teaching and am very eager to see what the future is. Now, will all of these sections fill up? I don't know. I hope so. But if they don't, that's fine too. I would have to cook dinner anyway, is my own rationale. And from a teaching perspective, earning $4,000 a month is life-changing. That really is amazing money. And so that's where, again, if you have not signed up for this platform and you think it might be something you would enjoy, if you like teaching, I highly recommend it. Once again, I do have in the description field of this video a link for you. I would appreciate, in exchange for this video, I would appreciate you signing up using my link below. I do make a commission from that, but I hope you'll definitely consider it. I know already, just week 1, I'm blown away by the response and so excited for what's to come. And I hope that you'll also be able to find a lot of value in it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.